Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Have you ever walked through a Chinatown? The vibrant gates, the aroma of delicious food, the bustling streets filled with languages from across the globe. It feels like a celebration of Chinese culture, right? But what if I told you that Chinatowns weren't originally built as cultural showcases? In fact, their story is much darker and more complex. They were born not out of choice, but out of necessity as survival zones created by exclusion and hostility. Today, we're uncovering the real origin of Chinatowns around the world, and it's a tale of resilience, exploitation, and the incredible power of community. Let's travel back to the mid-19th century, from the 1840s to the early 1900s. This is when the first major Chinatowns began to emerge. Think of San Francisco. During the gold rush, Vancouver with its booming industries, and even as far as London, Sydney, and Melbourne, Chinatowns also sprang up across Southeast Asia in places like Singapore and Kuala Lumpur, and even in Havana, Cuba, and Johannesburg, South Africa. It was a global phenomenon. But why then? What was happening in the world to trigger this mass movement? The answer lies in China itself. The Qing dynasty was crumbling, weakened by the Opium Wars, widespread poverty, and devastating famines in the southern provinces. For millions of people, leaving home wasn't a choice. It was a desperate gamble for survival. They became laborers, heading to America to build the transcontinental railroads, toiling in the mines of Australia and South Africa, or working on plantations in Southeast Asia and the Caribbean. Others found work as sailors, traders, cooks, and laundry workers, seeking any opportunity to build a new life and send money back home. However, when these Chinese migrants arrived, they didn't find the welcome they might have hoped for. Instead, they faced a wall of racism and legal exclusion. In many countries, they were barred from living in certain neighborhoods, banned from many types of jobs, and were often the targets of violence and riots. Governments passed laws specifically designed to keep them out. The United States enacted the infamous Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, the first major law restricting immigration based on nationality. Canada and Australia imposed heavy head taxes on Chinese immigrants, making it incredibly expensive for families to join. Them, faced with this hostility, what could they do? They couldn't live among the general population, and they were unsafe on their own. The logical response was to cluster together. They formed enclaves not because they wanted to be separate, but because they were forced into it for safety and mutual support. This is the true birth of Chinatown, not a cultural project but a fortress built against a hostile world. It was a place where people who were systematically pushed out could finally find a foothold. So what did Chinatown actually represent for these early immigrants? First and foremost, it was protection. Within its boundaries, people could find safety in numbers, away from the constant threat of violence. Second, it was about economic survival. When mainstream society wouldn't hire them, they created their own economy. Restaurants, laundries, and grocery stores opened, serving the needs of the community and creating jobs. Finally, Chinatown was a sanctuary for cultural preservation. It was a place where they could speak their own languages, practice their religions, celebrate festivals like Lunar New Year, and eat familiar food, all without fear of judgment or persecution. In essence, Chinatown was a shield. It was a community's defiant response to being contained, turning a prison of exclusion into a cradle of resilience. But how did these communities actually function on the inside? How did they manage to create order and provide for their people when the outside world had abandoned them? They built a sophisticated network of internal institutions. The most important were the clan and district associations. These were groups based on your family name or the specific village or region you came from in China. If you had a dispute with a neighbor, you wouldn't go to the local police, you'd go to the elders of your clan association, who would act as mediators. These associations also helped new arrivals find jobs, housing, and a sense of belonging. Alongside them were merchant guilds, which regulated business, and temples and schools, which kept cultural and spiritual life alive. One of the most brilliant innovations was the informal banking system, often a rotating credit system known as a hui. Members would all contribute a small amount of money into a pool. and each month a different member could take the entire pot as a loan to start a business or buy property. It was a system built entirely on trust, providing access to capital that no bank would ever give them. Now this brings us to a more controversial topic: who really controlled Chinatown? The power structure was complex and layered. At the top, you had the respected elders of the clan and district associations. They were the unofficial government, controlling business, mediating conflicts, and supporting new migrants. But there was another powerful force at play: the tongs. Tongs were fraternal organizations or brotherhoods. Some were simply mutual aid societies, providing protection and a social network for their members. However, others evolved to fill the power vacuum left by the state, because the police often ignored or actively discriminated against the Chinese community. Some tongs took on the role of enforcing order themselves. This sometimes led them into criminal activities. They ran gambling dens, opium parlors, which were often legal at the time, and in the darkest corners became involved in prostitution. It's crucial to understand that not all tongs were criminal gangs, but some did operate in the underworld, creating a reputation that would be used to stereotype all of Chinatown for decades to come. Finally, you had the host governments themselves, acting as an external force. They policed the borders of Chinatown, enforced segregation, and taxed its businesses, all while largely ignoring the community's needs. They often tolerated the vice and exploitation inside, only to turn around and blame Chinatown for being a source of crime and moral decay. Looking back, we can see clear advantages and disadvantages to the existence of Chinatowns. On the plus side, they were incredible economic engines. Immigrant-owned businesses flourished, generating wealth against all odds and allowing for upward mobility for future generations. Socially, the mutual aid networks provided a crucial safety net that saved countless lives. And culturally, they preserved languages, cuisines, and traditions that might have otherwise been lost, eventually becoming cultural bridges between China and the rest of the world. However, the disadvantages were severe. The very isolation that kept people safe also slowed their integration into broader society. Many Chinatowns became associated with poverty, overcrowded housing, and poor sanitation. This fueled negative stereotypes. Outsiders often saw Chinatowns as dirty, secretive, and filled with crime. These stereotypes were then conveniently used by politicians and the media to justify even more discrimination, creating a vicious cycle. We also cannot ignore the serious abuses that took place. Chinese labor was ruthlessly exploited. The companies that built the railroads and opened the mines paid Chinese workers far less than their white counterparts and forced them to do the most dangerous jobs. Many were seen as expendable. Human trafficking was also a grim reality. Some migrants arrived already trapped in debt bondage, forced to work for years to pay off their passage. Women, in particular, were vulnerable and were sometimes trafficked and forced into prostitution, with their passports confiscated to prevent escape. The authorities in the host countries were often complicit. They allowed these industries to operate because they benefited powerful local figures, then used their existence to criminalize the entire community. Cities used zoning laws to create forced ghettos, confining the Chinese population to specific areas and preventing them from owning property elsewhere. In this sense, Chinatown was a controlled pressure valve for the host society, a place to contain cheap labor while absolving the government of any responsibility for their welfare. So, who really benefited from all this? The biggest beneficiaries were the host economies. They got their infrastructure built with cheap, expendable labor. Governments benefited by containing an immigrant population they didn't want to integrate. Local business elites profited from this labor without having to provide fair wages or safe working conditions. The people who did not fully benefit, at least initially, were the first-generation migrants themselves, especially women and children, who bore the brunt of the hardship and exploitation. Over time, things began to change. As the 20th century progressed, many of the discriminatory laws were repealed. The children and grandchildren of the first immigrants, born in their new countries, began to integrate more into mainstream society, entering universities and professions their parents could only dream of. As this happened, the function of Chinatown shifted. It transformed from a survival fortress into a vibrant tourist destination, a celebrated cultural heritage zone, and a powerful economic hub for the diaspora. However, this transformation came with its own set of challenges. Today, many historic Chinatowns face the threat of gentrification as rising property values push out the elderly and low-income residents whose families may have lived there for generations. In some places, the authentic, lived culture is at risk of being replaced by a more polished, commercialized version for tourists. So when we look at the full history, what is Chinatown? It was born from exclusion, but it was sustained by solidarity. It was controlled by necessity, but it was exploited by external power structures. And ultimately, it was transformed into a powerful symbol of resilience. What began as an act of forced separation became one of the most enduring and successful immigrant survival models in global history. The story of Chinatown is a testament to the human spirit's ability to create community, culture, and hope in the face of incredible adversity. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden histories that shape our world. See you next time.